A motion that the closed meeting be closed and the board certifies to the best of each member's knowledge only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting to which this certification applies. And two, only such business matters as were identified in the motion concerning the closed meeting were heard, discussed, considered.
So moved.
We have a motion from Mr. Honeycutt, second Mr. Johnson. Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mr. Campbell is not here. Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Edwards is not here. Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes. At this time, we're going to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance at a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Mr. Nichols, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, for our July meeting. I'd like to begin by recognizing for the first time in a public board meeting our new principal at Bluestone High School. I'd like to ask the board in joining me in welcoming Ms. Maggie Wilkerson to the team. Ms. Wilkerson, if you'll come up. We're very thankful to have her join us, and she's been working hard to try to get many things in place.
Would you like to say a word, Mr. Nichols?
She may, I don't know.
Good evening. Good evening. I'd just like to thank you for the kind welcome. Please know that it is an absolute pleasure to return to Mecklenburg County Schools. As a 1999 graduate of Bluestone High School, I'm happy to be home. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the first item on our agenda for this evening is a great opportunity for us. We've been working with this for a while, and I'd like to ask Mr. Barry Simmons and his good friend, Dr. Barry Simmons and his good friend to come up for this presentation. The community is excited about our new schools. The community is excited about the programs that we're putting into the new school, and of course, with the International Business and Culture Academy, there's opportunity for students to work a great deal in music and to engage learning how to work with the various technologies. And we have the offer of a donation of a historic organ that would be a part of it. We worked with the architects in being able to make the school ready, the auditorium ready for this, and so I'm going to let them give you a presentation on the whole process.
Thank you, Superintendent Nichols. Thank you, Board, for the opportunity to be here. It's a pleasure. And by the way, I, too, am a Bluestone graduate, class of 1968. In fact, I'm an official old fart here, I guess. But at any rate, this goes back a little ways. I'm going to introduce my colleague here, Mr. Paul M. Mack Abernathy, Jr. He and I met while undergraduates at Elon College, now Elon University. He was a religious ed major, I was a political science major, but both of us had an interest in music. He was very active in the choir, I was very active in the band, and our paths really crossed when I was a member of a brass quintet that played with the college choir, and we went about some touring churches in North Carolina with our show, so to speak. At any rate, while getting to know him in that way, we found out that his father had an unusual home. He had a 311 pipe organ in his home. And I started helping Mac work on it as well as other installations. I think we put in a couple, and in fact we're going to Bristol, Tennessee tomorrow to work on one of the installations that we have. But Mac's father passed away several years ago, and Mac ended up with the organ, and we've been looking for a home for it. And so we hope that Mecklenburg County, the new school complex, will be its home. And so with that, I'll introduce to you my colleague, Mr. Paul M. Mack Abernathy. Take it away, Mack.
Take it away. Thank you. I don't have any prepared remarks. I basically came just to make him look better. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have now, collectively or individually later. This is just a very short 2.5-3 minute presentation, just a few pictures. The soundtrack you're hearing was done in the studio at my father's home. So this is a little bit of what the organ sounds like. You will be able to record tracks. People come in and play. You can save it. You can play it back later. It's very versatile the way we want to arrange it. So, any questions now or later, please, I'm available anytime. This picture is in the home in Atlanta, Georgia, where my father bought it. A retired Lieutenant Colonel, the Air Force, had it in his home. And the then Governor, Jimmy Carter, used to come to his house and listen and play the organ. So,
How old is it?
pardon me?
How old is it?
The instrument was built in 1927. It's another unusual. It was built in Van Nuys, California. Most of the East Coast Mortons were built in Indiana and under a Morton license. So this is another unusual thing about it. This is a picture of the loft where the organ was installed.
How many ranks of pipes were with the original console?
The original instrument was 8 ranks.
I'm sorry?
8 ranks.
8 ranks.
Pre-manual. In this installation, it was 14, and what we're proposing for here is 21.
21 ranks, and that will be with a MIDI box?
Yes.
Okay.
An Artisan Instruments, its trade name is Sound Engine, is what Mark calls it. But it will mimic, I'll use the word mimic because I'm for pipes, but it will do 21 ranks, which is larger than both instruments in Richmond at the Bird and at the Landmark.
Okay.
To give you some context of size.
What
That's my
type-
father there.
What type of MIDI system will y'all be using for this instrument?
Well, the Sound Engine is the tone generator. We'll be integrating with your sound system in the auditorium, is the way I understand it now, based on what we discussed with the sound engineers.
Okay.
So those details will have to be finalized.
And we have met with the architects and looking at the organ will not occupy a permanent space. It will be on wheels so that it can be moved when it's not being used and stored there. And we've had the conversation with the architects about the connections that would be required for our sound system to produce the music because the pipes simply could not be put in. But it can be set up and play by itself when we have specific issues. They talked about the fact that, of course, we're looking for the auditorium to be an area that the whole community will be able to enjoy, to pull the east and the west end together and be able to have programs there. I think that already some of the churches are meeting, together like that, and so this could be a benefit for that. And then they've been aware and made me aware that there's a revival of the silent movie era, and there are people who traveled areas just to have the option of being able to watch the silent movies with the original organs playing.
Yes.
And
It will do anything you want to do, from church services to Broadway musicals to whatever you want.
graduation to whatever.
Yeah, I would like whatever your school colors, if they haven't been decided on what they should be, I think the console ought to be painted in the school color livery and we redo it. With that, that's what we did. The instrument I have at Burlington's Williams High School, Go Bulldogs, is black and gold color, so we did the console in that. So there's all kinds of opportunities, hopefully, to maybe get some of the kids involved with some of this, not only with the refinishing, but some of the installation and how to work with it and play with it and build it, and they will come.
Great. Board members, any other questions?
So So the instrument itself is a gift,
Yes.
and then we're responsible, I suppose, for the maintenance and installation?
Maintenance, it shouldn't be too much of an issue. It's not like an existing pipe organ that has to be tuned every couple of years. That doesn't require that. There may be some maintenance over the years, but one of the advantages, hopefully, of getting other people involved with it is they can just take care of it themselves. If not, any electronic organ tech could come in and work on it. It shouldn't need a lot, so.
Any other questions?
And there was the idea of putting the MIDI and things in there, and they've offered to be able to do that as part of the gift.
Yeah, we will be responsible for raising the money that's required to do the retrofit and to install the MIDI part, as long as we have space to store the console and a place to put the control system, which is both a relatively small footprint. And the console would be portable, so as long as you have a place to tuck it away, it doesn't have to be in anyone's way.
I think it's a great gift opportunity for our community to be one of a very few
Yeah,
in the
comparable,
nation.
if you bought one of these from Allen, Oregon, you'd spend $150,000.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
When I saw organ donation on the agenda, this is not what I was thinking at all.
You were wondering if we were going to have a kidney donation or something?
I was really interested to hear which organ Mr. Simmons was going to donate.
Okay. Thank you very much. A new middle and high school project update. Primarily, we've talked about the fact that we are going to be having, we've had the bids that are being advertised in the newspapers. This is Skanska's. I've given each of you a copy of this that's come out for that piece. The notice to proceed for construction, move-in occupancy, and things of that nature that we are, still planning and being on time for. Been working with the architects and the engineers on several components. As far as the grave site that is there, we have identified members of the family. They have identified where the other family cemetery is, and we've gotten approval to be able to move that. So that should be happening relatively quickly, and we seem to be on target. There are some approvals of the overall plans that have been sent to all of the appropriate persons. We have not gotten the results back on any components for licensure for those that haven't been in place, but that's one of the things that we're waiting on at this point. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. Yes, sir. Just for clarification, in the paragraph, it says a relocation of the AT&T fiber line. And just correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember correctly, that we weren't going to have to do any moving of that there, that we had configured that where we weren't going to have to move that fiber optic line.
No, we've always known that we were going to have to move the line.
But it wasn't real expensive. I remember it
right.
wasn't as expensive as we
It was actually in the budget, as a budget item that they had, but the question was, would it go in front of the school or would it go to the back of the school?
Okay, all right.
Any other questions or thoughts related to that? Okay, item C on our agenda, Dr. Scales is going to update us on the school fee schedule.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, and school board members. Before you you should have a copy of the fee schedule for the 2019-2020 school year. And there were some minor adjustments that were made. They were highlighted in yellow. I'll be taking that off if these are approved. Some of the items was the expansion of the school planners for grades 2 through 5. Before, it was just one school, which at that time was just Clarksville Elementary School, but La Crosse and South Hill Elementary School also incurred that charge. As far as the change for the transcripts on the previous year were only shown at the high school level, but transcripts are actually being picked up from the middle schools and elementary schools. We did also want to make you aware that we're adding a non-academic charge, because there are times when parents will come back to the schools, and not just for school records, but then they'll come back for birth certificates, then they'll come back again for immunization records and other things, where that's taking up a lot of our staff's time. So again, we're asking for you to look at approving the charge of $3 at all 3 school levels. As far as with CTE supplies, what the change with that, in the past, it was just either $10, but we wanted to change it where it's $5 per course per semester, because there's some classes just 1 semester, and there's some classes that are first and second semester. So if it's both semesters, it's $10. It's a $10 cost, and otherwise it's getting everything covered properly as it should. There is one line item that I would like to let you know that needs to be stricken off of the form, which is on the high schools for the nursing assistant books. This afternoon, we were made aware that those are actually covered for under state textbook funds. So actually, we can remove that completely off with your approval. And that's it. Other than that, I did add one note at the very, very bottom. There are times in the past where requests for transcripts and documents were not in written form. We are now making a note for the written request being required by the division to get those particular documents to make it easier and fair for us in order to incur the cost. Do you have any questions?
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
Your CTE programs, FBLA, that's covered under the CTE supplies, those fees? If you're a FHA or FBLA or?
Those are not covered. They've got their own individual club accounts.
So we're not approving those.
But let's put it away. We just talked about it just about an hour ago because I did not realize that the FFA dues were on the sheet. Because actually that needs to be taken off because really that's more of an internal cost at the school level for those particular individual clubs.
Dr. Scales?
Yes, sir.
Like at the bottom of, under high school, CTE supplies, I mean, what are we encompassing, or what are we looking to gain for $5 per semester?
And let me address that with Mr.
Yes, I'm glad to see Mr. Cyphers. I'm glad to see Mr. Cyphers here,
Mr.
yes.
Cyphers going to address that one, so he's the one that's asking for the change.
I mean, you know, I just know $5 doesn't seem like a whole lot. I just want to know what they kind of get for that.
Yes, sir. Good evening, Mr. Nichols, school board members, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman. In the past, it was $5 per class, so that was $5 if you had a 1-semester computer class, or $5 if you had a year-long carpentry class. So what we're asking to do is to change it where it's $5 per class per semester. So for example, those students enrolled in carpentry that's year-long, they would then pay $10. They would only pay $5 per semester. And we're breaking it up into semesters just for the help of the students as parents as well, and also as far as using the money for projects and materials. It does not buy a lot, but it does definitely help, and we appreciate you all approving that when we originally implemented a couple of years ago.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Any other questions? None?
And I would bring to the board's attention that we have this on the action item for tonight, where there has been some information we've had before for the board to consider, and we need to have this so that we can go ahead and move for the new year coming upon us quickly.
And if I could just add one more point, since you did bring it up, and we were discussing about taking it off, but if we could make a point to strike the FFA dues, and because that's an individual club expense or cost. A lot of times that's done by the national organization. So if we could get that taken off with your approval, I'll make sure to get that done if that's approved for tonight. Any further questions?
None.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item D, the community eligibility provision we've been talking about, as we mentioned before. We are looking at expanding that to each of the elementary schools, and we think that's going to make a huge difference for us in many ways, and I just wanted to see if there were any questions or thoughts before we take that, have the action item on that.
Any questions, board? None.
All right, surplus textbooks, again, this is sort of a rolling thing. We have more textbooks that are becoming available because they're outdated and we need to make them available. So as we make them available, we just bring them to you to be able to continue to vote on those. And so we have more, and you've got information related to that. And then, of course, on the mascot, this is always one that we've been working with the last several months. One of the questions that had come up early on by the board was, what are the figures as far as the students and what the students were looking for, what the community was looking for. And one of the concerns that has come up about the mascot is that as we've been doing the various surveys through the summer, students were not in a position to be able to vote. So as we've gotten the information in, I'll just make it aware overall, as we've looked at the results, the Phoenix has come out on top with the students' vote and then the community. And so I would make a recommendation as we look at it that we make that vote for tonight, but the board will have an opportunity to discuss that. Any discussion?
What are
any
the
thought?
numbers? You said you had the numbers? Because that's a different outcome than before.
Right. The numbers, as I've looked at them, hold on, I wrote those down and had the spreadsheet right up. When I look at all of the data together, the Phoenix had 734 votes, the Mavericks 549, and the Mudcats 638.
Okay.
And just to clarify, that's all of the surveys.
That's looking at opening up with the surveys together, because the students, we wanted to have input from the students, and the students were able to vote with the first survey, yes.
Okay, so that combines the first survey.
Yes.
All three.
Plus the,
The three of them together.
oh, really? Okay.
You know, I try to make it a non-duplicated count the best I can, but when you put them all together, that's what we come up with in order to be able to get the support from the others.
And those numbers, 734, 549, and 638, that they are students and community members?
They are students and community members, yes. In just the last survey alone, it was all community except for like 9 people. And then that survey by itself, the Mudcats were on top.
You had the numbers for that last survey?
Yes, on just the last survey alone, the Mudcats came out at 635, the Mavericks at 223, and the Phoenix at 116.
My only concern from a math standpoint is that all those choices weren't on all 3 surveys, right?
Right. The only thing that was not on all the surveys was, at the very first one, we eliminated the option for the Lake Hawks. Of course, Mudcats was mentioned, but we didn't have it in the first survey.
All right.
Any other questions?
So are we voting on this tonight?
We
Yes.
have it as an action item option. You all can choose, as we have before, not to, but, you know,
We had talked about last month, moving it this month for action tonight.
right.
Right, which is fine. So the recommendation is,
Well, my recommendation is that we look at the overall numbers that we've had from them and go with the number 1 choice, which was the Phoenix.
Phoenix, okay?
I'll let it go. I'm not going to be late.
And finally, tonight, before we have the action items, there have been some questions that have come up related to a couple of items. One of them is the dual enrollment. Apparently, I understand from the community, there have been some questions about what is happening with dual enrollment with the school division, and so I'd like to try to clarify. What we have stated over the last 2 years is that the finding teachers with the master's degrees and the numbers of graduate credit hours required to teach the dual enrollment classes has become more and more difficult. And therefore, it was necessary that we let students and parents know that we were not in a position to guarantee that in our schools, Bluestone High School and Parkview High School, that we would be able to provide teaching coverage for them to be able to complete the associate degree. And so as we look at that, we also have been looking at making sure that the very best opportunities for students who want careers that require a college degree or higher would be available, and therefore we've been looking at implementing the advanced placement classes and getting the teachers available to do that, because that does not require the master's degree, as the curriculum for the AP classes comes directly from the universities. And so we have been in that process. There are some classes that have actually been a combination, AP and dual enrollment, if the teacher had the master's degree but was teaching the AP content. This last year was the first year we had some classes with that. The results of those classes, as far as the AP scores, has not yet come back. They don't come back typically until August, because there's a lot of work that has to be done with that. And we feel like we will continue in that vein to offer them as a combination as it's available. The other component of that comes into it is that the CTE classes, our career and technical education classes, have become more and more important for the career literacy program that we've been working with the academies. Those classes had not been deemed a part of the associate degree preparation, but students were getting certified in those areas. And we have more and more students that are getting certified because the class preparation is the same at the high school as it is for the community college, and they work together. We work together with them. In those cases, there are some of those classes that we actually get funding from the Tobacco Commission to help cover the cost of the classes for the CTE, not for the other. And we always are considered it beneficial to be able to do that. So as far as I'm concerned, we will continue as we can make available the dual enrollment, but we are looking to make sure that the AP is the option. And one of the items that you saw in my recommendation as a goal for this year is that we will strengthen from middle school all the way through high school the class expectations for students that are looking to move on to college as they pursue their career goals. And if you have questions about that, I'll be glad to answer them.
I do.
Yes, ma'am.
A question came up. Juniors, I believe, are required to take 111 and 112 English. Does the AP English take the place of both semesters or only one? And I didn't know how to answer, so that's why I'm asking you.
Right. The AP English 11 is typically focused on the grammar. And that's going to depend on the universities. When a student looks to take AP credit to the university, the universities and the community college will look for the qualifying score. Qualifying AP exams are scored 1 to 5. Qualifying score is considered to be a 3 or higher. That means that the student has demonstrated proficiency through that test to be equivalent to a college level class. The college determines which of the classes it will take the place of. So you can go to community college and it might be one thing. You can go to Virginia Wesleyan as an example of a private school, or Averett, it might be that it would cover for something else. You could take it to William & Mary or University of Virginia, and it would be considered coverage for something else. But I think that's the important thing, is we're looking at college preparation. And so that's not an answer that I can give you directly. When we have a teacher that's teaching the class and they get a passing grade, then it counts for the community college to have those 2 credits. Other questions or thoughts?
Mr. Ritchie.
The question that I heard more than once, people were using the words phasing out dual enrollment. And I thought that was a poor choice of words, because we're not phasing it out. It's shrinking of its own accord because we're not able to fill the positions, and we're trying to fill those gaps with AP, and in some cases lay AP and dual enrollment over each other.
That's correct.
But we're not intentionally or actively trying to phase out.
Not at this point.
Right, not at this point. And of course, you say that because at some point in the future, they've told us it may also cost money. Right now, it's not costing us anything.
That's an unknown factor. It's
Right, so
been
when that happens, that
handed
could-
to us by the community college, and there could be some cost factors, but that will be a decision even then that the board will have to make if we're willing to pay those costs. The issue is finding the teachers to be able to teach it.
Right.
Another option that I would point out, though, is that we have opened the door to have parents in a position to actually go to the community college and take some of those classes on their own, and we would count it towards the high school class because it's the same thing.
Okay.
We can't pay for that, but that is an option that we could give, we are giving students to be able to do.
That's great. So they would get the high school credit as well.
Right, that can count dual enrollment both ways. I mean, if it counts for them, it counts for us.
Okay.
I have one more question. Who pays for the kids to take the AP test?
If the child chooses to take the test at this point, the child pays for it. Those that are on free and reduced price lunch have an option of applying for a waiver or a fee reduction. It's not a complete waiver, it's a fee reduction.
And Mr. Nichols, how many slots do we have again this year for Governor's School?
I'd have to go back and look. We filled the slots.
Let me go to my office and find out, 'cause I don't want to give you the, because it was 7, but then we expanded it and added some stuff.
I remember we said we were going to add some, but I just
And
didn't
we
know if
did.
you all had come up with a
We
total
added-
number.
We added 2 students per school,
Okay,
which ended up adding more students for STEM and adding more students for humanities. So
Okay.
I'll bring that number back
Dr.
to you.
Skills, you just send it an email.
that's fine.
Okay, that's fine.
Thank you.
Okay.
And, go ahead.
Mr. Ritchie,
Palmer.
Mr. Ritchie, go ahead, then we'll come back to Mr. Palmer.
Just to think about for future reference, some of the kids I know that take AP at other school systems, they provide an incentive. If they get maybe a 4 or 5, they refund the exam cost. So I always thought that was interesting.
I think some of those school divisions have actually gotten grants that pay for that.
Okay.
But I'll be looking out for those grants as well. The ones that I'm aware of have gone, they're no longer available, but I will look for others.
Mr. Palmer?
And with taking the AP, if you fail to take the test, you would not get credit for it, isn't that correct?
Well, no. You get credit for the class. The only thing is, if you don't take the exam, then when the university looks at your transcripts, they see it as an AP class, but they have nothing to go by to be able to determine how to give college credit for it, because they give the college credit based on the exam result.
That's correct. That's what
Okay.
I think.
That's correct. Yes.
Any other questions?
All right, the other component then is I also heard there were some questions related to the GPA of students at the end of the year and how middle school classes might have an impact on that. And I just would point out that students in middle school that are typically the ones that are, would be moving towards college as a requirement for their career pathway, have the opportunity in the 8th grade to take some high school classes. Algebra 1, geometry, earth science could be available. I don't think we've had any in our system that have done earth science in 8th grade before. And then, of course, foreign language. And when they do that, that credit carries over, and therefore the grade that they get for that class carries over as part of their GPA. And I don't know if anybody else had any questions about that, but it can have an impact.
As a parent, I got a letter for, I have an 8th grader, going to be a 9th grader next year, and it gave us the option of whether or not we wanted that class to show up on the high school transcript. And I was very
Well,
confused
then,
by what that meant.
in that case, that would mean that if you wanted, like if they took the class and then as they got the grade, they felt like it wasn't sufficient, they would maybe want to take that class again. In that case, it would not count.
So if we did not want it, then they would have to repeat it. If they got an A and decided they didn't want it on the high school transcript, would they still have to repeat the class?
To get credit.
And I asked that, and I know that sounds strange to ask, but just so everybody understands the GPA valedictorian game for lack of a better word. Our students graduate with, the valedictorians graduate with GPAs over 4 every year. A lot of students do.
Right.
So any grade of an A in an unweighted class brings their GPA down because it's a 4.
Right.
So that's why the question came from. That's why somebody would turn away an A grade if they were working hard to try to navigate the. I hate the whole valedictorian system, and I wonder how much longer we have for something like that. But.
Well, I mean,
I just tried to. I had a parent ask me, and it wasn't me or my wife. Ms. Bailey.
Mr. Chairman, can I
Ms.
make
Bailey?
a comment? In thinking about this, I think I've come up with a solution to that problem.
Okay.
please.
Whereby we could still maintain or protect the system that we have in place. But if a child were to take a high school credit class on the middle school level, if we treated that class as an honors class and awarded them 5 points for an A, if they took it on the middle school level, and I spoke with a statistician student that just graduated, and he gave me, Ms. Bailey, I think that would work. You know, if we weighted the 8th grade high school course and made it an honors course, then it would offset the numbers when you add all those together.
Well,
It's
again,
possible.
that would be one of the things as we look at strengthening that whole process through the year, that would be a consideration for us to have. I do feel, from a philosophical standpoint, just worth mentioning, that in Virginia, every school division has the right to make this determination and how the GPA will be set up. And I have had conversation with university after university after university that says they don't pay attention to the GPAs that we send them because they know everybody does it differently in Virginia. They set up their own system to be able to work through that process. And we have an expert in that here tonight. I don't know if you want to ask him questions later on.
Yeah, from
but
Virginia Tech,
as a dean from
yeah.
Virginia Tech, he could certainly weigh in on that option if you're interested. But the GPA issue is one that I think, we have lived with for a long time. I'm certainly not suggesting that we play with it now because I think it can stir up a unnecessary hornet's nest. But obviously, this is some questions that are coming up, and this might be a way for us to study it and then look into the future with it.
All right. Yeah, I just was hoping we could clarify that for people that were asking. And I think that letter maybe generated some questions about it. And I think in addition to that, I believe the 8th graders were not tested with the, what's it called? The placement test that the community colleges uses, VP something.
VPT.
Right.
VPT.
Right.
They were not given, previously they had been given that at the school, and they weren't given that this past year.
Well-
So I think that people started to connect the dots on their own and say, oh, we're not going to be doing dual enrollment anymore.
At the same time that we've been talking about the dual enrollment piece, it's become more of a state issue. And one of the issues that the state has had, a statement that the state has tended to want to stick with is that students would not be able to earn college credit for classes before their junior year. And we have had, in order to be able to give the students the benefit of earning a full associate degree, we have had classes as early as 9th grade. And in order to be able to have those classes, they had to take the VPT early. So as the state is also looking at making similar expectations and guidelines throughout the state, not in Southside it's one thing, in Tidewater it's another, in Northern Virginia it's another, that's put a little bit more pressure on the community college to say it's not appropriate for us to do that VPT testing at the 8th grade level.
Okay. Thank you for answering that.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Nichols, getting back on the class ranking, some school divisions are moving away from it. The thought process is that there should not be a number 1, number 2 graduate It's almost like the same concept, all kids get a trophy, no more MVP. However, there are certain kids in the school divisions that are pretty competitive. They want to have an opportunity to compete for the first or the second spot. And I think competition is a healthy thing. However, when they're competing, some kids are taking college courses on their own, replacing those college courses with a high school course so they can increase their GPA. That's been going on for a long time.
Yes.
But personally, I believe that competition, academic competition, is still healthy, of kids being able to fight for the number one spot. Some school divisions, I consider watering it down. They're telling all the kids, everyone's, as long as you graduate, you're the same, and everyone graduates. But for the kids who are fighting hard to maintain that A and working hard, I think is a healthy option, a healthy idea, so they can keep that in place. I think Charlottesville has done away with it, and it's trending that everyone gets a trophy and everyone's the same, and everyone, there's not honor graduates, everyone graduates. And I'm sure there's going to be a push to come to this board in the future to do the same thing, to follow the trend. Let's do away with it. And some boards are voting on it. I hope when that does come around that this board will consider it, and I would say support the system. Maybe tweak it a little so it's somewhat fair. But academic competition as well as athletic competition is one of those things that drives kids every day in school. And it's almost as though if you're in the top 10% or top 20, some people don't think it's fair that there's a top 1%. But if you have 10 people applying for one job, only one person is going to get it. So it's about competition. And I just wanted to share my thoughts and not delay this meeting. Thank you, Ms. Nichols.
Thank you.
May I have a comment, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I agree with you along those lines. However, it is getting to be that it is, schools are doing away with it because it's causes so much commotion.
It's becoming inconvenient.
Yes, people coming up and just barely AP or waiving grades or whatever, causing one to get higher grades than others. It's going to come. It's going to come.
Mr. Nichols?
Okay. That's the end of my comments for the evening and information for the evening.
Okay. I'm going to delay my chairman remarks. We'll move on to the committee reports. Joint Education Capital Improvement Committee.
None, sir.
Thank you. Finance Committee.
The Finance Committee met, and we will recommend a vote to pay the bill. Also, Mrs. Pepper has a motion that we need to consider to transfer category transfer because she miscalculated. And she will explain that. Plus, she's going to give you information on OT prices that she has received.
Okay. Ms. Pfeffer?
Good evening, Mr. Chairperson, board members, Mr. Nichols. I need to ask for a category transfer from instruction to federal in the amount of $2,973.86. And this is to cover the end-of-year funds in federal. I ran the report before payroll was finished with the payables, and that was the amount that was left over to transfer.
So, Ms. Pepper, again, was that on last year or this year?
Fiscal year 19.
For 19, okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Pfeffer. All right, moving on, School Safety Committee.
We're going to be having a school board session this Thursday at 9 o'clock.
Thursday morning at 9 o'clock, yes.
9 o'clock, and that's going to include
The sheriff,
and sheriffs, and also,
several,
hopefully by next month, maybe we'll have something to pass on.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Gifted Talent Special Education Committee.
No report.
Thank you. CT Career Technical Education Committee report. Nothing. F, Athletic Committee.
No report.
G, Instructional Committee. Madam Clerk, do you have anyone for public input?
Yes. At this time, matters may be brought publicly to the attention of the board and administration. Public comments at board meetings are just one of many avenues for communication, and the board recognizes and appreciates the importance of input from and communication with the public we represent. The public is invited to sign up to speak. The clerk of the school board will write down your name, contact information, and the topic that you wish to speak about. The public is allowed up to 6 minutes at most meetings to express their views. Please respect that time limitation. It will be enforced. Please understand that it may not be possible to immediately respond to questions. As a reminder, it is inappropriate at a public meeting to make personal attacks, to be defamatory, or to disparage individuals or identifiable groups. Again, we welcome and appreciate your input. Prior to beginning your comment, please state your name to the board. Mrs. Ann Garnett Miller.
Mr. Nichols, board members, good evening, and Secretary. May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This is a list that I have put together for the new schools, for the naming of the hallways, the auditoriums, the libraries, classrooms, additional buildings. I know some of you are very young. You won't be able to identify because these are some of the first instructors and principals. I have included West End High School, Bluestone High School, Parkview, which is not complete, Parkview is not complete, or East End. But these are some suggested, and they are, I started with the principal, the coaches, female, male, library, the biology department, the foreign language. These are suggested names to name these departments after. Of course, you see the math, English, history, agriculture. And I even went as far down as the secretaries and custodians and cafeteria workers. I didn't know if you wanted to, if we were going to name those areas, but it would be a good idea. Also, and I will be presenting the same copy to the Board of Supervisors. It's been suggested that I bring them a copy also in person, and I will do that. Are there any questions before I go on?
You can continue.
All right. Ready? Like I said, this is a suggested list. For instance, I guess you can see that the first principal, of course, West End is Mrs. Harris, Mr. Harris, Mr. and Ms. Harris. I'm just going to go through this, just the principals, and tell Mr. Talaferro, East End High School, Parkview, Charles Morgan, the first, and Bluestone was, of course, Mr. W. Moore, excuse me. And I hope that you will use my list. If I can be of any other help, additional help, please let me know, because I do have a extensive list of the teachers and officials. Right. While I'm standing, I am still making the request, once again, to the board for the old West End High School, presently Bluestone Middle, to be given to the West End High School alumni after it has been used by the replacement of elementary students while their schools are being updated. To my understanding, the school is going to be used by the students while their elementary schools are being updated. After that, I don't think there's any plans for the building, and we would, as alumni, we would like to have that building. It means a lot to us. It is to our understanding the part of that historic institution will be torn down, yet there is a recent part from the gym to the right side of the building that is in good shape, except the restrooms, in which this is an area that can be updated. We ask, we want, and I believe we deserve this. Thank you. Are there questions?
Just for clarification, you're asking for the building?
Yes, for the
Which-
West End High School alumni.
And this is coming from West End, the Alumni Association is asking for this?
Yes,
Okay.
Which building is that?
The middle
West End
school.
High
The middle,
School.
Bluestone Middle?
Okay.
Bluestone Middle School.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
If,
I know some is going to be torn down, but it's still enough, it would be enough left for us to do what we need to do as far as having our affairs there, our yearly affairs and things throughout the year.
can you also send the board an actual written request as well? So we'll have it documented.
Repeat, Mr. Studevant?
Can you send a written request as well?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Yes, I will type that and get it to you.
Thank you.
All righty, I'll get it to Ms. Paula. All righty?
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening.
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
That's all I have.
Thank you. We're moving on to action. Get a motion, the school board approve the minutes of the regular school board meeting held on June 17, 2018.
Motion. Second.
Motion, Mr. Honeycutt, from Mr. Johnson. A second from Mr. Palmer. Any discussion? If none, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Abstain.
Mrs. Garner?
Abstain.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes. Get a motion that the school board approves the minutes of the special meeting held on June 25, 2018.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? If none, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Abstain.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes. Item C, bills.
The Finance Committee recommends that we pay the bills for this month.
We have a recommendation from the Finance Committee that we pay the bills. Any discussion? If none, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes. Get a motion that the school board approves the request for a category transfer.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Ms. Garner, a second from Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? If none, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes. Get a motion that the school board approves the personnel recommendations.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Ms. Garner and a second from Mr. Honeycutt. Any discussion? If none, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes. Item F. Mr. Nichols, do you want me to give the amended recommendation for that?
Yes, the recommendation for item F is that we allow the parents to pay for the one child and forego the recommendation for the other.
We have a recommendation from the superintendent that the board approves payment of one child and forego the expense of the other. We have a motion.
And that's just for this.
That's just for
year.
this school year.
And then the following year.
Following year, yes,
They would pay for both children.
right.
I make the motion.
Motion, Mr. Honeycutt, do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second, Ms. Garner. Any discussion? If none, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
No.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
No.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes. Next item, the school will approve the changing Monday, October 14th, 2019, to an instructional day on the 2019-2020 school calendar. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Motion for Mr. Honeycutt with a second for Mr. Palmer. Any discussion? If none, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes. Get a motion that the school board approves 2019-2020 school fee schedule.
So moved.
Motion for Mr. Honeycutt, second for Ms. Garner. Any discussion? If none, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes. Get a motion that the school board approves the VPSA reimbursement resolution.
So moved.
Motion, Ms. Garner. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Honeycutt. Do we have any discussion? None. Roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes. Get a motion that the school board deems the listed textbooks as surplus.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion, Mr. Honeycutt, second for Mr. Palmer. Any discussion? If none, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Yes.
Mrs. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
Yes.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes. Item K, new school mascot. Get a motion that the school board approves Phoenix as a new school mascot.
So moved.
We have a motion for Mr. Honeycutt. We have a second for Mr. Johnson. Any discussion? If none, roll call.
Mr. Ritchie?
Abstain.
Mrs. Bailey?
No.
Mr. Palmer?
Abstain.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes.
Mrs. Garner?
No.
Mr. Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Sturtevant?
Yes. Madam Clerk, review that with me, please.
I have 3 yes and 2 no, and I have 2 abstain.
You have 3 yes, 2 no.
That's correct.
Okay. And 1 abstention?
2.
2 abstain.
Okay. We want to move on? And all board members stand on their vote, correct?
So that does not pass, or it does pass?
It does pass.
It does pass.
It passes? Okay.
I'm sorry, just for clarification, can you give us the numbers again? I'm sorry, Paula.
Okay. For Phoenix as the new school board mascot, I have 3 yes. I have Mr. Honeycutt, Mr. Johnson, and Mr. Sturtevant. I have 2 no, Mrs. Bailey and Mrs. Garner. And I have 2 abstained, Mr. Ritchie and Mr. Palmer. Mr. Campbell and Mr. Edwards are absent.
Thank
Okay.
you.
A reminder, July 30th through 31st, new teacher employee orientation. August 1st, 2nd, new teacher employee orientation. August 5th through the 7th, teacher workday professional development. August 8th, open house fee day. August 9th, convocation, teacher workday. August 12th, first day of school. August 19th, regular school board meeting. Moving on to board member remarks. We're going to start to our left. Ms. Bailey.
Yes. Mr. Sturtevant, I served as parliamentarian for this board now for 6 months, and I'm going to ask to decline that position for the rest of this year. And I thank you for the opportunity to serve, but I would formally request that someone else take that position. And then my second thing was I had notes prepared this evening because I noticed a board norms document on an earlier agenda, but I noticed that it was removed. So I would really like to see that, a sample board norms document for the board to review so that we might be able to amend it and tweak it for our own use.
Is this going to be the one that you sent to the board?
This would be, the sample document from Chesterfield County was emailed to each board member last week, and hopefully you all had a chance to read that. I think, I'm not sure exactly how it was there, but then it got removed. But anyway, I had made some changes of what I thought we could, something that we could work with. So I'd like to see that on our agenda for next month.
Okay. The board, Ms. Bailey did mail us the board norm. What I put out to the board is, once you looked at the norm, if you wanted to move in a direction with that, the board, we can put it up there and have it up for discussion. So we have a public discussion. We can talk about that a little later. Ms. Bailey, do you have anything else?
No, that's all.
Okay. Mr. Palmer, well, first, Ms. Bailey, thanks for serving as parliamentarian.
Thank you.
Mr. Palmer? Ms. Garner?
Oh, I'd like to thank whoever put the nice goodies at our station today. It's going to come in handy when we go to conferences, the little bag we have. And good luck on getting ready for the new school year.
Thank you, Ms. Garner. Mr. Ritchie?
I want to thank Mr. Nichols for making the clarifications. I think every now and then it's just good to say these things again in public so everybody can hear them. And whenever I start to hear, when their rumor mill gets going, wound up. So it's nice just to put that to bed. And also I wanted to say I agree with Mr. Sturdivant about academic competition and how beneficial that is. But like in sport, I just think everybody needs to understand the rules. And so we need to get those out there as often as we can so parents understand what a weighted class is, what's not a weighted class, and all those things that play into the GPA, because it's not as easy as it used to be. It used to be a very simple process. And I'd also like the board, after what Ms. Bailey said, to consider whether we need a parliamentarian or not. And I know some boards don't have parliamentarians. As a matter of fact, we might be unusual having one, and so another option would be just not to nominate somebody in that position. And that's it for me tonight.
Mr. Johnson?
Nothing tonight.
Mr. Honeycutt?
Yes. Want to welcome to our new staff. I haven't formally had an opportunity to come and visit, but I will soon and introduce myself. And just want to say welcome to Mecklenburg County, and I hope that you find it an enjoyable experience, one that you will prosper in, and one that you will feel at home and welcome in. So that's my prayer moving forward. Also, I want to go back to our parliamentarian. Again, Ms. Bailey, thank you for serving as our parliamentarian, and I will just answer a little bit of what Mr. Ritchie said. I do believe we do need a parliamentarian. I also believe that we need board norms so that all of us are on the same playing field. When I was elected 4 years ago, I saw very early on that I had 4 responsibilities. According to the Virginia statute, our 4 responsibilities as board members is this, and I want to remind the public of it. We supervise the superintendent. We pass policy. We pass personnel, and we make a budget. That's our job. End of story. So again, I just want to remind people of that. While we're elected, while we're hired, I am here to do the will of the children of Mecklenburg County. That's why I ran. That's why I'm running again for another 4 years. I want to finish what I started with our new schools. I'm proud to be a part of Mecklenburg County Public Schools. It's not always perfect, but we've gotten some things done, and my prayer is that we'll continue to move in a positive direction, that we treat our employees with the utmost respect that they deserve. Thank you.
Mr. Nichols, you have anything else?
No, sir. We're going to be getting ready over the next few weeks to get school started again, and it's a lot of work to be done. So I think our staff is ready. Some of them have had a chance to take vacation, and so hopefully we'll get ready.
It is right around the corner. To our administrative team, keep working. The doors are going to open soon. The kids are going to be there. It should be another exciting year. We have a motion from the board to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Any opposed? Meeting's adjourned.